Micah and Joanna had been friends since they were children. They didn't just grow up together. They shared a childhood. Micah was born on July 31st, 1997. Joanna was born only a week later on August 6th, 1997. Micah was born into a quaint, colonial-style house on Sherwood Road in Hingham, Massachusetts. His parents were both lawyers. They owned a golden retriever. It couldn't get more stereotypically American. When Micah turned 1, his parents found out that Micah had a new sibling on the way. The current house wasn't fit for a family of 4, so they eyed the home down the street that had just been put up for sale. They closed the deal a month later, and as they scrambled to find a buyer for their current home, Joanna's parents came along. Joanna and her parents moved into Micah's old home, and Micah moved down the street. Micah and Joanna's parents hit it off, and they soon began arranging time for the two children to play together. Micah and Joanna, even as toddlers, loved spending time with each other. They were magnetically attracted, and as their lives quickly became intertwined, they even shared birthday parties. When they were old enough to play outside on their own, they took full advantage. Sherwood Road became their dominion, a place where their imaginations and limitless energy could provide endless entertainment. A suburban street transformed into a medieval kingdom. The woods became a jungle on another planet. There were infinite storylines, infinite possibilities, unlimited missions to accomplish, or mysteries to solve. It was an incredible, some might say perfect, childhood. Until October 30th, 2004, the day before Halloween. It was raining that day, hard, cold rain, the kind of rain that falls on New England towns before winter creeps in a month later and life freezes over. Nothing, and especially not bad weather, ever stopped Micah and Joanna from playing outside. They didn't even think of bad weather as bad weather. To them, it was an opportunity, a plot twist in the storyline. So outside, they went. Typically, on fair weather days, there were adults outside casually supervising the neighborhood children as they played. The parents in the neighborhood took it upon themselves to supervise other people's children in addition to their own. The neighborhood children were allowed to roam somewhat freely, but usually a parent or two kept an eye out. However, on October 30th, 2004, there were no adults outside. There were no parents keeping an eye out. The pounding rain kept all adults inside, while Micah and Joanna, emboldened by the rain, wandered further away from their respective houses than usual. On this particular day, they were government agents in pursuit of an alien spacecraft that had crash-landed somewhere deep in the woods. So deep into the woods they went. They ventured so far that, through a clearing, they spotted a road. They had never wandered this far away from the neighborhood. It was exciting. They charged toward the road, broke through the clearing of trees, and ran right onto the pavement without looking. They laughed, out of breath, and looked around excitedly. The road was the dead end to an access road for town maintenance workers. It was infrequently used. The pavement was cracked, the yellow lines nearly invisible. At one end was a locked gate, and in the other direction the road wound into a steep bend. What lay beyond the bend was concealed by the trees. "Come on, we gotta keep going. We gotta find the alien ship," Micah said. Joanna didn't answer. Her eyes were trained on the bend in the road. "Joanna, come on," Micah prodded. "I hear something," Joanna uttered. "What?" "A car, I think." As if on cue, a red pickup truck came winding around the bend. It drove slowly toward them. Micah moved out of the road. Joanna stayed put, staring at the truck as it rolled forward. "Joanna, move!" Micah yelled, but she just stood still. The truck rolled slowly to a stop 10 yards in front of her. The truck door opened, and a man stepped out. The man stood by the truck and stared at Joanna. Micah's heart began to pound. His parents had warned him about talking to strangers. Micah's mother was a prosecutor in Middlesex County in Massachusetts. She primarily prosecuted sex crimes, though as a child, Micah's understanding of what she did was minimal. She was intentionally vague in her descriptions of her work, but what she did bring home were warnings. Never get in a car without someone you don't know. Never get in a car with someone you don't know was among the many warnings she would administer to her children. Joanna, Micah pleaded, let's go. Joanna remained silent. She just stared at the man, and the man stared back. You know me, right? The man asked. Joanna nodded. Joanna, you don't know him, Micah yelled. No, Micah, Joanna insisted. I do. The man smiled. You remember me, right? Joanna nodded again. Micah's heart was beating a mile a minute now. He ran up to Joanna, clutching her arm. You want to come for a ride with me? The man asked. Joanna, no, Micah said. Joanna smiled at the man and nodded. She gently removed Micah's arm. Micah, it's okay. I know him, she insisted. The man smiled and walked around to the passenger side door, opening it. Joanna began walking toward the truck. Micah pleaded with her, tears running down his face. But she just kept walking. She hopped up into the passenger seat. The man closed the door, walked to the driver's seat, started the engine, turned the car around, and drove off. Micah watched, paralyzed, as the truck drove around the bend and out of sight. He ran, wet and cold from the rain, while his face ran hot with terror, through the woods all the way home. He told his parents what happened, and his parents told Joanna's parents. Within an hour, the entire neighborhood was searching for Joanna. Within 2 hours, the entire town was. But by nightfall, Joanna hadn't been found. And by nightfall the next day, she still hadn't been. Joanna's parents were devastated. Her father became catatonic. Her mother became restless. Everyone barraged Micah with questions. Yet Micah only had a few simple answers. What color was the man's truck? Red. What did the man look like? He had white skin, some facial hair. How did he dress? Plainly, a plaid shirt, jeans, Timberland boots. What was the man's license plate number? No idea. Where did he say he was taking Joanna? He didn't. Why did Joanna get in his car? No idea. Did he force her to get in? No. Was the man someone they knew? Joanna said she knew the man, but Micah had never seen him before. There were only so many questions that Micah had answers to, yet the same adults continued to ask him the same questions, as if some of his answers might suddenly change. When the third nightfall came and Joanna didn't, Micah waited for his parents to go to sleep and snuck outside. He stood on the front lawn and looked up at the stars. He imagined that Joanna was in an alien spaceship way up in the sky, that she was having a fantastic adventure up there among the stars, that she was visiting other planets, meeting all kinds of new creatures, seeing different kinds of plants, and eating new exotic foods. He imagined the alien spaceship touching down on Sherwood Road when the voyage was over and dropping her off. She would run up to him excitedly, give him a big hug, and tell him all about her grand adventure. And when she was done telling him the tale of her expedition, they would fall asleep together on the soft grass under the stars. As this scenario swirled through his imagination, Micah heard soft, slow footsteps in the distance. He looked around. Nothing. He listened more closely. The footsteps continued, soft and slow, and getting closer. They were coming from the street. So Micah stepped out into the street and looked around. He looked left, where the street, fully illuminated by streetlights, ran straight for the length of a football field and then fish-hooked to the right. There was nothing on that side of the street. So Micah turned to the right, where the street ran straight for about 20 yards and then fish-hooked to the left. That side of the street was almost entirely dark. There was a single street light illuminating a patch of it, but the light worked rather poorly, so much of the street was fully enveloped in darkness. Micah listened closely. The footsteps were coming from somewhere in the darkness. "Hello?" Micah called out. No response. But the steps continued. They were getting closer. Micah stood, frozen, waiting for the source of the steps to emerge. Micah squinted, trying to see something, anything. A small human figure emerged. The figure walked forward, zombie-like. "Hello?" Micah called out again. The figure ignored him and plodded forward into the yellow patch of light. Micah looked closer. It was Joanna. "Joanna!" Micah called out. He ran up to her and hugged her. But she didn't hug him back. She didn't do anything or respond in any way. She just kept walking forward at a painfully slow pace. Micah looked at her, puzzled. "Joanna?" He walked alongside her, examining her face. Her eyes were like pits. Her face was cold and clammy. "Joanna, are you okay?" Joanna remained silent and continued walking down the street toward her house. Micah walked with her all the way to her front door, trying fruitlessly to elicit some sort of response. Joanna plodded up her front steps and knocked. Lights in the house quickly flashed on, and the door practically flew open. Joanna's parents scooped her up immediately. They thanked Micah, and Joanna's father escorted Micah home. Joanna's father told Micah's parents the good news, and by the next day, word had spread through the entire neighborhood that little Joanna was back safely. But Micah knew that Joanna was different. She had changed. He knew that something had happened to her in those days she'd spent with the man in the red truck. And whatever that something was, she would never be the same Joanna again. Yet her changed demeanor seemed to get lost, if not entirely overlooked, in the adult news cycle. In the days following her return, Joanna spoke to the police and was examined by doctors. She told the police the man hadn't harmed her in any way. He had taken her to a small village somewhere in the woods. She wasn't sure where. The village reminded Joanna of Plymouth Plantation, the historical recreation of the American colonial settlement that they would take school field trips to. According to Joanna, there had been other people in the village, men and women, and they treated her like she was a princess. Whatever food she wanted, they made it. They made her beautiful, hand-sewn clothing. She slept in an enormous bed in her own house that they had designated just for her. It had been, according to Joanna, the best 3 days of her life. The doctors who examined her confirmed that no physical harm had been done. So the adult news cycle accepted and circulated that very narrative. Joanna was back, and she was okay. Nothing bad had happened. But Micah knew that something was different. This wasn't the same friend he had played with 72 hours ago. In fact, Joanna seemed to have forgotten that they were friends at all. They no longer played together or spoke or sat next to each other on the school bus. Joanna's mind, it seemed, now existed elsewhere. It existed in that mythical village in the woods, where she had lived like a princess. What happens next in this story is bizarre and highly disturbing. The events of our next chapter take place 18 years later, and they will take us to that village in the woods where unspeakable horror awaits.